Hello, everyone. A very good evening to all of you who've joined us here today. A big hello from Singapore. This is Juliana Chan, and I am the founder of Wildtype Media Group. This is a Singapore-based media company. You can find our flagship magazine, Asian Scientist Magazine, in print, online, and on social media. Without further ado, it is my distinct pleasure and honor to have Jimmy Wales, co-founder of Wikipedia, as my guest today to talk about the world's beloved repository of knowledge. It is almost impossible, frankly, to imagine life without it today. As a journalist, I'll be honest with you, I use it multiple times a day. And frankly, even Siri and Alexa would have some trouble functioning without it. But of course, today we will also be discussing some very serious topics. We are here to discuss the opportunities and sometimes perils of citizen journalism in a world of alternative truths. And we know who to thank for coining that phrase. We are also at a very unique point in history where we are fighting two viruses concurrently. Of course, the coronavirus that has caused the COVID pandemic, and another viral threat, which is fake news and misinformation. So much is truly at stake, which is why we are very fortunate today to have Jimmy Wales join us today, who will help us understand and unpack some of these topics. Let me bring Jimmy online right now. All right. Hello, Jimmy. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. I'm like everybody, I'm in lockdown. I'm here, as you can see, in the attic bedroom of my house, and this is where I'm working from these days.
So, you know, I'm so sad that I didn't actually get the chance to see you at Davos this year. I attended, and I know you last attended in 2018, if I'm not wrong.
I'm there every year. I was there.
Every year. No, so, you know, you have, by and large, one of the most interesting media founder stories out there by a long shot. And I've truly always admired you as a media owner myself. I must tell you that none of us can tire of a very good founder story. So would you take us on a walk down memory lane?
Sure.
Right back to the time in 2001, where you published maybe the first edited article on Wikipedia, please.
Yeah, so actually the beginning of Wikipedia actually starts a little bit before 2001. So 2 years before Wikipedia, I founded a project called Nupedia, which was an effort to generate a free encyclopedia written by volunteers in all the languages of the world. But unlike Wikipedia, I didn't really know about online communities. I didn't know how to create it effectively. So what we did is we put together a very academic process. It was a 7-stage process to get anything published. And it was very intimidating for volunteers. We had a lot of people who signed up for the website, a lot of people were participating, but it was hard to get anything published. And indeed, when we published one of our first entries, it took about 2 days, even though it had gone through this rigorous peer review process with professors and so on. It took about 2 days for someone who read the article to let us know, oh, this is plagiarism. And we actually had to take it down. So even that very academic process didn't really work very well. And what did work was lots of people looking at things. So one of my employees, Jeremy Rosenfeld, came to me and said, have you seen this wiki concept? So we started looking into the wiki. And in fact, we were concerned because we had this large community who are very academic and very serious about Nupedia. We didn't want them to be upset or whatever. So we decided to launch it on a different domain name. So called it Wikipedia, because it's made from a wiki, and a wiki, in case people don't know, is just a website that anyone can edit. That's the basic definition of a wiki. It comes from a Hawaiian word, wiki, which means quick. So the idea is quick collaboration. And so then after about 2 weeks, we had more work done than we had in almost 2 years of Nupedia. That this opening up, this really allowed people to come in and participate, allowed people to actually just write things and get things done, correct each other, improve things. And so it was quite remarkable, that pivot, as they call it now. Back then we didn't call it a pivot because that's a new word, but we pivoted.
So since the start of the year, by the way, thanks for that origin story. Always love that. Since the start of the year, Wikipedia has had a very important role in the COVID pandemic. You know, I saw a number, it says 100 million views on COVID-19 articles. We have, of course, to thank a group of editors called the Wikimedia Medicine. So how do you see Wikipedia's role in this pandemic and in the dissemination of health and medical knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really important role, and a lot of the values of Wikipedia of quality, neutrality, reliable sources, all of those values are obviously incredibly important. And in fact, it's always good to talk about, and I'm glad you mentioned Wiki Project Medicine, simply because there are people behind this. And a lot of people, their mental model of how Wikipedia works is they just imagine a million people each adding one sentence each, but really that isn't how it works. It's a core group of really dedicated people who monitor things, who check things. And I've been saying for years, and it becomes more important now, that Wiki Project Medicine is one of the most fearsome and strong groups in Wikipedia because they're very, very strict about sourcing and so forth. And that becomes incredibly important right now when we see all kinds of strange misinformation flowing around. Here in the UK, there's been problems with people burning down 5G towers because of a rumor that 5G causes coronavirus, which is nonsense, but there you go. So I think we have a real responsibility because people do turn to Wikipedia, and everybody knows it isn't perfect and there can be errors and so on, but people generally do turn to it because it's pretty good most of the time. And you would be astonished, I would be astonished if I went to Wikipedia and read some crazy conspiracy theory. That's just not what we do.
Okay, that's a relief because as a journalist, I use it all the time, and I'm a science and tech magazine, so I had better be telling some accurate news. As someone who likes data and understanding who's around today, I thought we'd do a bunch of polls, bunch of snap polls. First of all, I just want to find out from our audiences today, who is attending this talk? And if you don't mind, just to let us know whether you're from the pharma industry, are you an academic, a student, a medical professional, are you an investor, a journalist, or from the government, or if you do not wish to reveal that, you can always put other. I'm just going to give you.
Great. I'm on Zoom all the time. I never saw the poll feature.
Oh, that's such a shame. That's the most fun part of it. We have 3 questions, so more fun to go. Is everyone ready? Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's go. Share results. So, wow, we've always had many students and medical professionals. Today we have a lot of others. So clearly we are seeing a very different crowd today. Interesting. I have another. And now we're going to go into a new question, which is, this is my favorite. How frequently do you use Wikipedia? Bear in mind the co-founder is with us, so be sensitive. No, I'm kidding. You're probably enriched for a group of people who love it,
Yes, I think there's a selection bias here. So
selection bias is the word. For good reason. For good reason. They came to hear you, Jimmy. Probably not hear me. Okay, I'll give you 3 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Let's go. I'm going to share the results. It turns out 42% of our attendees use it daily. I didn't even put a multiple times daily, and then 38% use it weekly, 17% use it monthly, and then the rest. But guess what? I have yet a 3rd question, and this is probably one of the most important questions, and that we will come to, Jimmy, in a bit, which is, how confident are you about the news and information that you are reading and consuming on wikipedia.com? So this is important as well, because you may use it every day, but how confident are you about it? All right, 80% have voted, 81%, and end. So Jimmy, how do you feel about the results here? What do you have to say?
Good.
40% confident. Is that what you expect? 21% very confident.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the key for me when I'm reading Wikipedia and how do I feel about how confident I am, I think it varies depending on the topic. it varies depending on the individual article. I mean, sometimes you'll see, one of the things that I think builds trust in Wikipedia, but also diminishes trust in Wikipedia, is that we're very transparent about, there'll be a notice saying the following section doesn't cite any sources, or the neutrality of this article has been disputed, which is, I always say I wish the New York Times would publish these sorts of things sometimes, to give us a little warning that there's potentially a problem.
Yes.
So that means we are always telling people, be careful. Wikipedia is open for editing and so on. But actually, I think that helps improve the confidence, because okay, you've got to check the sources, and it depends on what it is. So many topics, if they're very, very famous topics, you can be sure a lot of good Wikipedians are looking at them. If they're very boring topics, but not controversial, then it's probably going to be fine. Somebody who's really geeky and interested in, snails is going to write a great article about snails. And then it's the sort of borderline, like it's a small topic, but it's kind of controversial with a small group of people. That's where it can be a little bit less clear. Maybe not enough people have reviewed it. Maybe one person wrote it who has a particular perspective and so forth. So you kind of have to judge, how it is. It's actually interesting in terms of how frequently some people use it. I mean, one of the interesting numbers about Wikipedia is that our reach on the internet is somewhere in the neighborhood of 33 to 38%, depending on which country. This is the last numbers I looked at. It's probably higher now. Our traffic has skyrocketed during lockdowns around the world. And so someone said to me, wow, here in Canada, 38% of everyone in Canada sees the site at least once a month. And I said, that seems low to me. What are these other people doing? They've been on the internet for an entire month and they didn't end up at Wikipedia. I don't even understand how you use the internet then, because there's, you search for anything and there's going to be Wikipedia there. But anyway, it is quite part of the infrastructure of the world now.
Okay, so if we're gonna use Wikipedia all the time, then we had better learn how to digest the information that we see there. And I want to ask you, this is a very important question, because as much as we are in a virus-induced lockdown, this has also caused us to search for information more online. And according to the United Nations, we are experiencing they're calling an infodemic, information pandemic, of misinformation, conspiracy theories, even treatments that have proven fatal in many cases. So could you give us a little bit of a 101, Jimmy? How do we develop, you and I, the digital literacy, the logical thinking that we need to consume COVID-19 information safely on the internet?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the basic principles are familiar to everyone. Most people know how to think clearly enough and so on. But we also tend to be, as human beings, we're both rational and emotional. And a lot of the material that goes viral and gets shared over and over, it confirms either something that we hope is true or something that we're afraid is true. And so we share it further. And in that emotional moment, we maybe stop and we don't reflect as much as we should. So I always like to tell the story, a very minor story of once when I almost shared fake news on a very inconsequential topic, but I was browsing the internet and something came across, Facebook or Twitter or somewhere, clicked on the link and read this really amusing and interesting story from a very unknown kind of media outlet that basically said, scientists have determined and discovered something that we all knew was true, which is that if your cat were big enough, it would eat you. And so everybody, when I mention it, everyone laughs, right? That's quite funny. And anyone who's had a cat or knows cats, you do think, gee, I'm glad I'm big, because probably it found something to eat me. And I was going to share it with my daughter, who has cats, my teenage daughter. And then I said, oh, wait a minute. I just read that and I thought, hold on. They didn't cite the study. They didn't give a link to the study. They mentioned one of the researchers. So I was able to Google the name of that researcher, found their website, found the article, the original paper. And basically it was a paper that said that big cats and small cats have certain psychological traits in common. That's all it said. It didn't say the small cat would eat you if they could. So somebody, probably a young intern, working at a clickbait kind of place, they saw this academic article. They thought, oh, funny. They thought of a funny headline. They thought of a cute angle. They wrote it. And, I nearly shared it because everybody likes, it's a fun cat story and why not? But so even though it's harmless, what caused me to begin to make that mistake? It was something that I hoped was true. It's something, in this case, not that I was afraid of or that was a negative thing, but it's just something fun. And so it kind of short-circuited my critical faculty just a little bit. Now, fortunately, in this case, I didn't do it, but I do think that, you know, this is one of the things that we need to be talking about a lot. And obviously, it's a thing that needs to be taught in school as well. Media competence is a more important skill than ever before. That people, you know, if you think back 50 years, what are the sources of information that might be available to me? Well, it was newspapers, magazines, books, all had publication, you know, and there were lower quality newspapers, higher quality newspapers, but that was kind of it. Now there's a huge wide range of sources of information, including complete crackpots on some crazy blog somewhere, including actually another mistake that people make, particularly around medical information, is oftentimes if you go and you read a medical study that shows, you know, some sort of a result, you may think, oh, I'm reading, you know, this is the New England Journal of Medicine. It's very high quality. But the truth is, if you don't have the context and the background to understand that, oh, this paper probably got published because it's a real outlier. It's a very surprising result. And because it's a surprising result, yeah, it's worthwhile for scientists to publish and discuss it, but probably it's going to be overturned by further research and so on and so forth. And this is particularly true, like right now, the flood of information from quality sources about coronavirus means people are publishing quite quickly whatever results they can get because the world is desperate. You know, professionals need to get information sharing going. But that means for us as outsiders to that whole process, if I read something that says, oh, this medication worked really well for 12 patients, well, I don't know, like I'm not even in a position to evaluate is that good or bad. And certainly, you know, President Trump would say it's because he's so smart, he's really good at this stuff, but no, don't think so.
You know, Jimmy, I used to be a researcher and I run my own lab, and it is, and thank you for saying that research that we publish and right now expedite the publishing can actually be proven incorrect later, and that's a feature, not a bug in the system. That's what scientists do. We publish to the best faith, and another scientist comes along and proves that our hypothesis wasn't right. So, you know, it's a little bit of that sort of literacy that we need to share. You're completely right to say that that could be taught in schools. And frankly, media literacy is not necessarily the biggest topic being taught right now in schools. Back to Wikipedia, you know, it used to be that the victors would write history. But now, the internet, 80,000 volunteers or Wikipedians are writing it. You know, to what extent do you think that Wikipedia represents the best of the internet, you know, the democratization of information? Maybe also, you know, tell us a little bit of the perils of that happening.
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that's important to understand about Wikipedia is that we've never regarded ourselves as a wide open free speech platform. So Wikipedia is not the place for people to come and post their random thoughts and opinions and so forth. And in fact, coming to Wikipedia with some strong opinion that you want to push is really frowned upon. It's really not behavior. You're supposed to be as neutral as you can be. Of course, we're human beings, so getting to neutrality is never easy, and there's a constant internal struggle. There's a constant dialogue, debate, discussion going on to try to get to quality, to try to get to something. And so, you know, I think one of the problems, so one of the great benefits is that history isn't necessarily written by the victors anymore. But we do have problems in that, to the extent that we've seen a decline in the quality of a lot of media due to the reduction in the total number of journalists out there. We know that financially, it's become very hard to do local newspapers and so forth. Means that for us as Wikipedians, our local sources are often in decline. So you can probably write a better history of a small town in America for what happened 30 years ago than what's happened in the last 5 years, because oftentimes those small towns have lost their local newspaper. The history isn't being written. That first draft of history isn't there. And so it becomes harder then for the encyclopedia to be of quality in the long run.
Okay, I'm going to ask two more questions to Jimmy, and then I'll invite all of you to ask your questions live. So I just want to remind you, you can raise your hand using the palm icon at the bottom of Zoom right now. This is a palm icon that you see here. And just get your question ready because I'm going to come to you soon. Okay. You know, Jimmy, I run a science magazine and we think about artificial intelligence a lot, 5G as well recently. I want to talk about something that people have somewhat neglected. We always think Wikipedia is a journalistic site. We forget there's also a very big data site, you know, thanks to Wikidata, which is tagging all the information on the site. And companies are now using the Wikipedia's data to train AI neural networks. Like Siri and Alexa, they need Wikipedia to answer their questions. Google search, all searchers seem to pull up and put Wikipedia data in the search results. So tell us, is there some bigger plan to create the world's brain, you know, on the internet?
Not really. I mean, one of the things that I think is really important and powerful about Wikidata is that, like everything that we do at Wikipedia, it's freely licensed, it's open to everyone. And I think that's really important in terms of enabling and encouraging competition. So, you know, you can imagine if that database were proprietary and owned by a Google or an Apple or whatever, just as perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong. Their code, the things they work on, they do proprietary things. I don't have a problem with that. But this data set means that a startup, a young developer, can say, oh, I have this great idea of something I could build with this big data set, and they can create it because it's completely freely licensed, freely available. And I think that's really potentially very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, given that, you know, everything I search for has a Wikipedia answer, so I'm hoping to see what will happen with AI networks trained on Wikipedia data. So my last question.
I think one of the interesting things, obviously, an area that I'm very interested in is around bias and AI and bias. And so Wikipedia, of course, tries really hard to be neutral, but we're working from sources that are out there in the world that may, hopefully we knock off the rough edges of the bias by citing, you know, sources that disagree and things like that to try to come to some consensus. But it is an interesting thing to think about if an AI's view of the world is driven simply by data. It's very hard to avoid it thinking of certain structural problems in the world as actual facts of reality in a certain kind of sense. And so, you know, probably if you scanned through in a very naive way with an AI to say, oh, let's predict the gender of the person in charge of Asian Scientist magazine, you might look and you might say, well, scientists, lots of men, Asian cultures still quite, you know, male dominated, magazine publishers, mostly men. And so suddenly you say this assumption, which of course, humans struggle with those kinds of simple assumptions in our mind based on experiences. And I think that we have to be really careful about that.
You know, Jimmy, I don't know a single female publisher in my sector anywhere. I'm the only one. I feel quite sad sometimes. I look around, but you know what? You know, thanks for pointing that out. That's an interesting observation. You're very quick. Okay, I'm going to talk about a quote that you once gave to Google co-founder Larry Page. This is you might remember this one. You said, well, you can tell me if you did say this. Launching Wikipedia with no ads, no paywalls was a series of bad business decisions. You know, by some estimates I read, and tell me if you concur, were Wikipedia to accept banner and video ads, it would be worth as much as US $5 billion. But you know, it seems that your mission did not just stop there at Wikipedia. You have now a new mission to found Wiki Tribune, WT Social, a social media site that does the exact same thing, does not show ads. So you clearly believe in that whole ethos. Could you tell us more and perhaps tell us why we all should join we could choose.
Sure, great, yeah. So I definitely have said that. I don't think I ever said it to Larry, actually.
Really?
I'm not sure where that part came from,
Oh,
but I've
God.
said it again. And I've actually been saying it with respect to WT Social, saying, you know, launching with no ads and no paywall, a series of bad business decisions, but that's how I've built my career so far. So it's kind of a joke, but the idea of WT Social is to create a new type of social network. And in order to do something new, see, I'm a big believer that your results follow from your business model. And so if you have a business model that is advertising driven as a social network, you're going to end up in the same place. Basically, you optimize for addiction, you optimize for keeping people on the site as long as possible to see as many ads as possible. And I'm not interested in doing that. I want to do something different. And so our business model, we just say, look, you pay if you want to, but you don't have to pay. No paywall, just if you believe in the site and you want to pay, you can pay. Now that's a bit crazy, but what it does for us internally is it changes our incentive structure completely. Instead of building something to keep people addicted and clicking with clickbait headlines, manufactured sort of lightweight controversy and things like that, you've got to create something that people will over time say, you know what, this is an important part of my life. This is worth having. This should exist. I should chip in to help pay for this. And so we design in a completely different way. We want to optimize for quality. We want to optimize for thoughtfulness. And so far we've got nearly 500,000 people signed up. A portion of them are paying, enough that we're a small team, but we run more or less at break even. Got a couple of developers, community people, and so on. And we're constantly changing the site. We're constantly revamping, learning, iterating in a very sort of pilot project kind of way. And so we're doing a lot of new things all the time on the site and trying new things and experimenting and learning. So I'm having fun. That's the main thing.
That's excellent. I'm just looking through the Q&A section and I saw a very interesting question about deepfakes by Elizabeth Rosenberg. I don't know if you're listening to this, Elizabeth. I would like to give you speaking privileges and to ask the question right now. Elizabeth, are you here? Would you like to ask the question, please?
Yes, I am. Hi, good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you.
So what would you like me to say?
Well, you asked a beautiful question in the Q&A section about deep fakes. And would you like to ask Jimmy that question now?
Well, yeah, right now the technology is at its infancy and you can still detect a deep fake, but over time you're not going to be able to. And same with AI. Like right now, you can sort of tell by the reaction if you're actually speaking with a person or not. And over time, that's just going to evolve and evolve. And it's an opportunity to disseminate false information.
Thanks.
And especially if you have political agendas. You know, you could have Trump or Obama or anybody say anything. And most people don't have the wherewithal. I think this is one of the things that we don't learn in school, or that a lot of people don't learn in school, that when you have sources of information, that you have to view them with a degree of skepticism.
Indeed.
I use Wikipedia as just a starting point for gathering information.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Jimmy, what do you think?
Yeah, on the deepfake question, I am concerned about it. I'm watching that area with great interest. At least to date, it's quite hard to do certain types of deepfakes with quality. But it's getting better all the time. And so there will be, for one thing, there'll be a technology race between people who are building the deepfake technology and people who are building technology to recognize and flag them. And that's going to go on. But I think one of the things that it will mean, and this is a sort of an interesting thing, is that if it were possible today, let's imagine that someone comes out tomorrow with a really fantastic deepfake technology that can really fake in a very convincing manner, both to the naked eye and also to any algorithm, that this looks like Donald Trump saying something. suddenly we lose all trust in video as a documentary method, and that's quite hard. But we're not just going to go around not trusting anything. We will begin to trust things. And so one of the things that I think it can do is it can really bring back some of the importance of the traditional journalistic institutions that, you know, if a video is circulating online of Donald Trump saying something, well, I mean, crazy, but he does that already every day, but something surprising, let's say, or maybe it's not Donald Trump, maybe it's Barack Obama, and they're saying something really surprising, well, people will immediately say, oh, that's probably a deep fake because that's not right. But also, it'll be really important to say, no, there was a reporter from the New York Times who was there and recorded this, and it will testify, I saw this person say that thing. It becomes, you know, just a different world. Now, obviously, if we do get this kind of technology, there will be leaked kind of fake exposés, hidden camera, things like that. But already, if we want to look at how these things work, even without any technology of deep fakes, it's a very common thing. If you are on Twitter, I guarantee you right now, I could go on Twitter and in 5 minutes, I could find you photos of riots or protests that are from Los Angeles from many years ago, being passed off as something that happened this week by people who have some kind of an agenda. So people can always fake things and lie online. And so when we think about that, which is a problem, that begins to be sort of the first wave, potentially.
So I have a very interesting question. Thanks, Jimmy. From Yuki Tan. If you're here, Yuki, would you like to ask the question out loud? Wow, there's so many. There are 4 Yukis. Strange. But you know what? I'm going to ask one of them to speak. Yuki, are you here? You know, unmute. The number one phrase, Jimmy, in the pandemic is, I think you're on mute, isn't it? You know what? I'm just going to read her question, which is, what can the government, so besides Wikipedia, and I know you have your own process, what can the government and organizations do, all of us, basically, the public, do to reduce misinformation and fake news? So what can all of us do? We want something actionable. We don't want to be passive.
Sure. Well, I'll start. I mean, I'll start with individuals, with each of us. I think one of the things that we can do is be more alert and be more aware, and to be careful that we're not sharing misinformation. And so don't share something that's emotionally feels like something you should share until you actually check it. But also, don't be afraid to speak out. I mean, I became, I think, slightly unpopular with the parents' WhatsApp group from my school because somebody was posting some nonsense about onions, chopping onions to help with coronavirus. And I said, hold on, that's not helpful. That's wrong. That's misinformation. And it's, you know, the source was complete nonsense, a crazy blog. And I just said, look, let's not share this kind of rumor and things. Let's only share quality information here. Okay, I'm a jerk, but I think a lot of people were like, yeah, actually, that's better. So speaking out against misinformation can be important, particularly in those kind of private settings. And then for organizations, I think a lot of organizations can help with misinformation by simply being more transparent, more open. In fact, I think journalistic organizations, which are clearly on the front lines of combating information, they have to understand a shift that's happened in the world that is something that is really important, which is just saying, well, I'm a reporter from the BBC and I'm telling you this. That isn't enough to prove it to people anymore. People have lost trust in institutions, that you actually have to show your work. You have to explain how you came to some conclusion. You have to, you have to prove it to people. And so that's part of the quality of journalism, and that's important. But all kinds of organizations, businesses, be more transparent about what you're doing, be open, correct yourself, just be more honest. And then finally, governments. Governments is very tricky because I'm not a person who would call on governments to regulate the flow of information, because that's a very dangerous area to get into. you lead to situations where, you know, governments will ban information. I mean, because governments are often some of the worst culprits in sharing misinformation and so forth. And so that's a complicated area. At the same time, you know, making sure that libel laws are usable by people and fair, so that if the misinformation that people are saying about you is a lie and it's defamatory, that you actually have some recourse. There are things like that.
I have a very interesting question by someone called Zach Yap. I think it's a fan. We have three more questions from this person. Zach, would you like to ask your question out loud on the edit wars on Wikipedia? Actually, I'm personally interested in that question because, Jimmy, when I visited the Wikimedia Foundation, all the 30 YGLs there had so much to talk about on that topic of the talk pages. The talk pages was big on our mind. Zach, ask the question, please.
Sure. So I was just thinking about a more general question on how we can decide who is the arbiter of truth, and that relates to that question I asked about. So when there are edit wars, who is the arbiter of truth? Is there intervention by anyone? And if there is intervention by Wikipedia, by whom should that be?
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is a fantastic question because it really gets at how Wikipedia works in practice on a day-to-day basis. So the first thing that happens, so an edit war is typically, the article keeps changing back and forth, back and forth. One of the things that we have is what we call a 3 revert rule, which is that you really shouldn't change it back and forth more than 3 times, because if you just keep doing that, that's pointless. Like, stop doing that and have a dialogue. But the first line is to actually have a discussion, have a dialogue on the talk page. And oftentimes those conversations are done in good faith, and they're thoughtful, and they're sometimes some of the most interesting things as people bring to bear quality sources, and then they work hard to try to reach some accommodation that says, look, these sources say this and those sources say that, and we're going to try to find some balanced way of presenting all that information. So that the talk page is important. And then there are various places people can go to call in some help from other Wikipedians who are maybe not so emotionally invested in the issue. There's, as an example, there's the BLP notice board, so Biographies of Living Persons notice board. And there's a group of people there who are really good at doing biographies and are really well-versed in policy, who probably don't care at all about this particular dispute. They just want Wikipedia to be good. So often those people can come in, be a calming force to say, look, let's not keep fighting, let's find a solution to this, and so on. Then sometimes there are very intractable disputes that go on for a long time, and they're very difficult and complicated. And in those cases, there's the arbitration committee, and in most of the big languages of Wikipedia have an arbitration committee. It's elected by the community. They're the most senior sort of leaders in the community. And they have the power to make binding decisions. And it's not uncommon that their binding decision will be, you're all banned, this whole group of people who've been edit warring, you're all banned from working on this entry anymore, you're too emotional, you're not doing anything productive, let's let some other Wikipedians come in and take it on. Or they may make very specific rulings. It always depends on the particulars of the case. And I think what we try to avoid, there shouldn't be on content matters. It's not really certainly not up to me, it's certainly not up to Wikipedians to decide what is the truth, but to present what quality sources have to say. And as long as we stick to that, then in general, we get to a good place and we get to resolution. And the kinds of disputes that can go on for a long time are exactly what you would expect. There are issues where people are emotional. They're the controversies of our day.
Jimmy, a lot has happened today at Facebook. I have a question from Ravi Balakrishnan. Ravi, if you're hearing this, would you like to ask your question live? Ravi, I've given you audio privileges.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. And this has been a great chat so far. So I wanted to ask, do you have a point of view on whether social media should fact check the way Twitter has been doing with some of Trump's recent posts? Where do you stand on that debate?
Thank you.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the answer is yes, but it's a cautious yes. So I always want people to step back a little bit and think of, roll back history in your mind, and if you imagine some 5 years ago, before this all became such a big issue, or maybe it's 10 years ago, if Facebook had announced, we're going to start fact-checking things that people post, and we're going to start making some editorial judgments, that's kind of a dystopian fear, like that could Facebook begin to algorithmically begin to shape the global conversation in a way that's favorable to Mark Zuckerberg, or that reflects his biases and his perspectives and points of view, which, I don't think his biases, perspectives, points of view are horrible. I mean, I have disagreements with him, but it's fine. But we don't want that. That's not what Facebook should be. And Facebook quite clearly doesn't want that. At the same time, we know that these platforms have been subject to substantial amount of manipulation. Certainly, they've struggled with problems of armies of AI bots sharing and resharing and amplifying things. And they need to do something about that. And part of that has to be about fact-checking. It has to be about this. But I think it's an area that's fraught with a lot of difficulty. So, one of the things I would like to see them do, and I think Facebook is to some degree doing this, is try to push that decision-making outside the company onto independent fact-checkers. Facebook now has this, I forget what they call it, some sort of a global board. And it needs to have some real power, and Facebook has to sort of listen to them. But I think these are very difficult problems. And one of the reasons that the problems are difficult is that these platforms, unlike Wikipedia, are set up and have presented themselves as places for people to come and post their random thoughts and opinions. And when you allow that, which is a perfectly fine thing to do, there's nothing wrong with people posting random thoughts and opinions, but we have to accept that many people have really dumb opinions, and things are going to get shared that shouldn't be, and offensive things are going to happen, and so on. And that's kind of okay. But I do think that these platforms, never mind their responsibility as proper corporate citizens, and I think that is important here, but never mind that for a second, I think they face a real business challenge here. I think, and I've said this to people at Facebook, if people have become convinced, and they're becoming convinced, that your company and your products are destroying civilization, that's a brand problem that's going to cost you in the long run. It's hard to stay a successful company if people hate you, particularly something as consumer oriented as Facebook. Facebook needs people to continue to like Facebook, or eventually they're going to leave. And I think that therefore they need to think about the quality of experience that people are having. And if people are having the experience that many people have on Twitter, for example, which you go on Twitter and you just get heaps of abuse for almost any opinion you have, okay, it's not really, it's a little bit addictive, but actually, if I had a better place to be, I would go be there.
I have one question has been upvoted by everyone, and it is probably not something you expected to be asked, but it's a lighthearted one, which is, what is your favorite Wikipedia page of all time, Jimmy Wales?
I've just upvoted that one myself. I like that question. It's fun.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to vote in the poll. It wouldn't let me panelists vote, so I didn't.
So
vote.
You upvoted that question, so therefore you want to answer it. That's awesome.
Yeah. So this is a great question. I always think of maybe what is an amusing story, and it also tells a story about Wikipedia. So there is a page in English Wikipedia called Inherently Funny Words. And when it was first created, this became a page that kind of was like a dumping ground. It's a very old page for any random word people thought was funny, and they would put it on there. And it was nominated for deletion. And then there was a deletion discussion, and somebody said, hold on, wait a minute. This is actually a real concept. If you read about the theory of humor from famous comedians, famous humorists over time, there is this idea that certain words are funny as compared to other words, and it's important in how you write a joke and what the punchline is. And so they went through and they became very insistent that you had to name a source to a valid, a comedian, a humorist, or something like this. It used to have this fantastic illustration, and it was a picture of a cow with horns that were like just tied on, like fake horns. So it was an amusing photo, and then beneath it, it just said, according to some, cow is an inherently funny word, which I thought was fantastic.
Thank you for sharing.
That, and so, it's words like badger and yogurt. Well, you didn't laugh, so maybe they're not.
No, there are some words that are truly quite funny. Actually, as a journalist, I would say we use certain words for humorous value and also for serious value. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, on that funny note, on the humorous note, I must say we've run out of time, and I like to end promptly. So thank you, Jimmy, or Jimbo, as your Wikipedians call you. Thank you for joining me as a guest this afternoon at London time, and of course in the evening at Singapore time. I want to thank your entire team at
Wikipedia. Come and say hello to me on WT Social.
Yes. After this, everybody, please sign up to WT Social and say hi to Jimmy. Once again, Jimmy, I'd like to thank your team at the Wikimedia Foundation and Raju for organizing the Visit Raju Narisetti, Catherine Ma, because it was the best take home from the entire San Francisco trip.
Oh, wonderful.
I still think about it. It's been 2 years, and it was quite a sentimental and emotional thing. We discussed many topics. So on that note, thank you, Jimmy. It was a great pleasure to chat with you today. Thank you, everyone. Signing out from Singapore. Goodbye.
Bye.